Awesome. All right. It looks like we are ready to roll. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today for this Donorbox webinar. My name is Jenna, and I'm the brand ambassador for Donorbox, and I'm also going to be moderating this conversation today. For those of you who are not familiar with Donorbox, we provide nonprofits with simple and effective tools to manage their online fundraising activities and connect with individual donors on a deeper level. To date, we have helped over 35,000 organizations raise $700 million. So to learn more, you can just visit donorbox.org. Today, we are joined by nonprofit social media expert Julia Campbell, yay, to talk about the 6 types of stories nonprofits should be telling on social media. Julia was recently named one of the 25 most influential nonprofit thought leaders and one of the 7 nonprofit thought leaders to follow on Twitter during the coronavirus crisis. Julia is on a mission to make the digital world a better place. She is the author of 2 books, a mom of 2 kids, and a returned Peace Corps volunteer. Her passion is to get organizations and change makers to stop spinning their wheels and start getting real results using digital tools. Julia, I don't know how you do it all, and you do it all so well. Everyone, we are in good hands today. Now, before I pass the baton over to Julia, I just want to mention a couple of items. Please note that this webinar will be about 45 minutes with an additional 10 minutes allotted at the end for Q&A. You will notice in the bottom right-hand corner, and I know all of you have found it already, that you have a chat box. Please use this chat box to drop questions throughout the webinar and interact with each other. We will keep track of your questions, and we will answer as many as we can. We will also be sharing several helpful links throughout the webinar, and you can click those as they appear in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Now, without further ado, Julia, I will pass it over to you. Everybody, please give Julia a warm welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Jenna. All right. Yes, we're going to pass it over to me. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. How is everyone doing today? We got the slides up. It's a beautiful day here I just want to make sure I'm not on mute. I've done that before where I've talked for about 10 minutes and no one heard a word that I said, but it's a beautiful day here in Boston, Massachusetts. I think it might even go into the 80s this weekend. So we're very, very excited. Rainy London, Poconos. I heard, I saw in the chat, someone from Malawi and South Africa. I served in the Peace Corps in Senegal in West Africa. So cheers to all my African friends. Okay. So Jenna already did a fantastic welcome. The real things that I want you to know about me are that I come from the nonprofit sector. I've been a development director. I've been a marketing director. I've cleaned the coffee pots and got the balloons for events and done all the things. And right now I'm a board member. I am a consultant, I'm a speaker, a trainer. So I get my hands dirty with nonprofits every single day, really the only clients that I work with. So if you're from a small organization, you're bootstrapping, you are doing all the things, figuring out social media, fundraising, marketing, all of that, I have your back. I've come from that particular arena. So you're definitely in the right place. If you do want to get my digital storytelling workbook that actually dives a little bit deeper into what we're talking about today, it's totally free. You can do the little fancy text option. If that doesn't work for you, just go on over to my website and look for a workbook. Go to jcsocialmarketing.com /workbook and grab the workbook. And then you can get started collecting and crafting and sharing stories today. So why do I start with a slide of West Side Story? Well, this particular movie set in 1961, obviously it was adapted from the 1957 hit musical of the same name, inspired, of course, by Romeo and Juliet. I have a daughter who loves musicals. And the challenge is to find movies and musicals and TV shows that are not too adult, but that are kind of just right, not too babyish and not too mature. And when we watched West Side Story, I really realized several things about storytelling in particular. So I talk a lot about the power of storytelling. I train clients on it. I wrote a book on it, but I don't usually get to witness its true power in action. So Isabel, like most kids, can't usually sit through an entire movie. Like anything with superheroes and CGI, that just bores her. But the simple, timeless tale of the Puerto Rican Sharks versus the New York City Jets, two star-crossed lovers, a society determined to keep them apart, it just absolutely captivated her. These universal themes of love and hate and fear and loyalty and revenge. What I noticed was that the universal themes, this power of compelling storytelling, it's not about the flash. It's not about the tools. It's not about the shiny new objects. It's about the substance of the story. So great storytelling for nonprofits especially, it really does more than just communicate a message. It gets to the heart of how humans process information, and stories help us visualize how we can improve our own lives and the world around us. And popular stories and narratives define our culture, our values, and what we deem important. And not only that, it's scientifically proven that storytelling affects the brain in significant ways. Stories trigger a release of chemicals in our brains, including oxytocin, which is emotional bonding, dopamine, pleasurable feelings, and cortisol. And for our purposes, because we are marketers and communicators and fundraisers, for our purposes, humans are much more likely to remember narratives than statistics and data. And that's like the most important thing that we need to know about storytelling. So I think Antonio Damasio really put it best when he said, we're not thinking machines, we're feeling machines that think. We want people to see the world as we see it. Not only that, younger generations really like stories and respond to stories in their marketing. People from the ages of 18 to 34 are particularly interested in stories. Millennials or Gen Z, they don't want sales pitches. They want to hear, what are you about? What's your brand narrative? Like, what do you stand for? The most impactful types of stories are humorous, dramatic, or heartwarming. But at the end of the day, it's really just about the stories that make us feel something. The stories that make us feel something. That makes us much more inclined to listen, and not only listen, but absorb the information that we're being told. And stories translate to revenue, right? They translate to revenue in the consumer world. And of course, consumers, donors, they're the same people. Our donors are also consumers, right? So when people enjoy and identify with a story, they're much more likely to open their hearts and their minds and their ears, and then eventually their wallets. And they're also much more likely to tell the story to others. So we know that people want to hear stories. Study after study has shown donors want stories. This was a study that was done asking donors, what kind of communications do you want to hear from the causes you support, from the nonprofit organizations you subscribe to? And 60% said they want to hear impact and success stories. They want to know where their money went, or they want to know what is the needle moving on this cause that I care so much about. So donors want stories, and they want to hear about the information in a way that they can process it. Now, of course, I couldn't do a storytelling webinar without this quote from Game of Thrones. I know we've probably all forgotten about Game of Thrones. I kind of want to forget about the finale. Was not a big fan of the finale, but I'm a gigantic Game of Thrones fan. So the point of the ending, what I took away from it was that storytelling is super important, right? What unites people, what creates that shared identity amongst people. And that's what I want us to keep in mind. So obviously armies, gold flags, all of that may not necessarily resonate with you and your mission. But we need to remember that stories unite us and also divide us. But for your particular purposes, you want to build that shared identity between the cause and between the people that you're speaking to. So we have to stop thinking about storytelling as some kind of trendy buzzword, some marketing strategy, some fundraising tactic. We really have to start thinking about it as a gift for our supporters. So we can't just think about it transactionally, like we tell a story, we get money, we tell a story, we get money. We have to start framing storytelling and baking it into every single thing that we're doing and think about it from the supporter and the donor perspective. So I want you to type into the chat, can you name a brand, a business, or a nonprofit storytelling campaign that truly resonated with you? And doesn't have to be a campaign. It could just be a story. Like a Hallmark commercial, I think is a perfect one. The Hallmark commercials always, always, always get me. Oh, St. Jude, Dove, the Hole in the Wall Gang Camp. Oh, I haven't heard of that. Leader Dog, Tile, Preemptive Love, Doritos. I love it. Charity Water, John Lewis Christmas ads, Hint Water. Wow. See, look at Shriners Hospital. Dove Body Positivity comes up all the time. Absolutely love, love, love the Dove campaign. Samsung, Shriners. Wow. Hole in the Wall is a nonprofit in Connecticut for kids facing life-threatening illnesses. I'm sure they do some really amazing storytelling. Subaru. Oh, Patagonia. Yes, Patagonia. What a brand. You just get that vision in your head, that feeling when you think about Patagonia. Airbnb. Yes, because if you look at what all of these particular brands and these stories and these campaigns have in common, even Charity Water, all of these, it's all about aspiration. It's about what could be. It's about your vision for the future. It's not necessarily about what is going on day to day. It's about aspiration and creating a better world and transformation. Marine Corps, oh my gosh, the Marine Corps, what a story they're telling, right? Kroger, I love it. VRB, I love it. Great. Thank you for making my point so eloquently. A fantastic example of storytelling is also addressing questions that your supporters have. So Dear Future Mom is a storytelling campaign done by an organization actually in Italy. And they provide support and resources to parents and families who have been diagnosed that they're going to be having a baby with Down syndrome. And then they provide them with resources throughout their whole life. So the question they get all the time from expecting parents is, what is my baby's life going to be like? What is our life going to be like? And so they answered this question with these beautiful snippets, these beautiful stories. So it serves a purpose of addressing myths and misconceptions about what it's like to live with Down syndrome and to have a child with Down syndrome and raise a child with Down syndrome. And it also answers this question for donors, like, what do we do here in our organization? So it's just a perfect example of storytelling that kind of encompasses and can tackle all of the different audiences. So my 3-part digital storytelling framework that we're going to go through, here, and I go through more in the workbook that I hope you took a minute to download. Collect, craft, and share. So these are really the 3 parts. When you're collecting your stories, you have to know your audience, right? Who are you trying to reach? What do they value? Why are they, or why would they be interested in your work? What's in it for them? What are their motivations? What drives them to participate? I know that a lot of my clients have ethical storytelling concerns, and I think this is a huge, huge piece of this. We have to advocate against storyteller exploitation, against having our subjects be exoticized, tokenized, and otherized. So there are a lot of storytelling concerns that we do have to address, and we have to put policies in place, and we have to understand that these issues are going to come up when we're telling client stories. We have to be very careful of things like re-traumatization, confidentiality, implicit pressure. I've worked in domestic violence. I've worked at a rape crisis center. I've worked in an anti-human trafficking organization. So I'm very familiar with all of this. And the key is just to have very, very good, succinct policies and to make it a real point to have ethical concerns at the forefront of storytelling. So here are some tips about how to do storytelling maybe in a little more ethical way, especially when we're doing it on digital channels. Look beyond the obvious story. Expand beyond stories of those who engage with your services directly. You've got board members and community partners, and we're going to go through a lot of those stories. Challenge audience assumptions, and then create guiding documents that you can refer back to. Emphasize growth over hardship. That's another one that's very hard to do. But when you've got an eye on collecting a story, you've got to figure out the perspective, the angle that you're going to take. So great storytelling also inspires an action for our purposes. Sometimes you just want to tell a story to tell a story. It could be, I want people to feel inspired and happy and proud to work with us. It could be, I want people to smile. That could be. But great storytelling inspires an action. Here's some of the actions that you may want to inspire with your storytelling. So with that, we're going to go through the 6 story ideas to explore and collect. But I wanted you to have an infrastructure and a little bit of background on storytelling, ethical storytelling, and some of the tips that you can use to ensure that you're collecting the best stories that you can collect. Creation stories. These are very powerful. It's not just, here's our founder and here's what happened. It's what was the need. And then I like stories that talk about what is the need now? How has it changed? And how have things stayed the same? Obviously, the Malala Fund. Malala is the founder of the Malala Fund. She has a heartbreaking and tragic founder story that she turned into a positive. You have Adam's story, Pencils for a Promise. What I love about this story is it's not just Adam went to India and found all of the kids asking him for pencils, and then he built a school. No, that's a recounting of things that happened. That is not a compelling and interesting story that I want to read. So I love the way they framed the founder story. It began with a question. A small boy begging in the streets of India, "What do you want most in the world?" "A pencil," he replied. So you automatically want to read more. And actually, his book is fantastic. Adam's book about founding, how he founded Pencils for Promise, is actually a fantastic book if you want to read a good founder story. But going beyond the simple, I was concerned about homelessness and I did this. What's the real crux of the matter? What's the heart? What's the emotion behind it? Values and ethics stories, another bucket of stories to pull from. These are the stories that are going to show me a glimpse behind the curtain of your values and ethics. What do you stand for? Who are you working for? What is this all about? So we know that donors give to charities based on shared values. So how can you convey your values and beliefs to supporters? Denver Rescue Mission is a great example. They are a religious organization, and they're always talking about transformation. They're talking about religious transformation. Their values and their ethics are very, very much entrenched in the stories that they tell. And they actually do really great storytelling on social media. So I recommend following Denver Rescue Mission. Look at this story. Most of John's life had been spent in and out of jail. When he ended up homeless, the only place he knew to go was Denver Rescue Mission. You can read about his journey, and it's never exploitative. It's always positive. It's always from building up a person rather than knocking them down and focusing on the hardships. This is the Mira Coalition. They did an entire storytelling campaign called My Immigrant Mom, and it was to highlight the sacrifices that recent immigrants have made. It was just to promote the value of immigration. It's one of their values. It's one of their core values and ethics. Now, I think the pushback I get a lot from organizations that don't want to show their values and ethics is they think, well, what if this offends someone? And I think, well, if they're not invested in immigration, they're not going to be a donor to the MIRA coalition, right? Denver Rescue Mission, if you are an atheist, you are probably not going to give to Denver Rescue Mission because everything they do is very based in religion. So it's almost about attracting the right people, but it's also about telling people this might not be for you, and that's okay. We are not for everybody, and our missions are not for everyone. The third story, impact story, this is the one that we're probably most familiar with. These are the stories of lives changed, trajectories altered, the benefits of the work, not the features. This is the result, the outcome, the accomplishments. And this is also a great chance for you to address those myths, misconceptions, address those knowledge gaps. Now, when you're telling these stories, it's not so much about what they went through, but how they felt. What were the sounds and the smells and the feelings, not just John was sick and came to the hospital and got well and left, because that's just a simple recounting of things that happened. When you're telling a story, there has to be some conflict, some intrigue, something to pique your curiosity. Rosie's Place, one of my favorite tiny, small, pretty much volunteer run organizations where I live in Boston. They really do such a great job storytelling. They have a tiny staff. All her life, Mukita struggled with mental health issues. We met her when she was sleeping in her car in Rosie's Place parking lot. That was the start of a new life. To see a video of Mukita's story, click on our bio. So first of all, you've got the visual. Secondly, you have the setup, and then you have the hook. That was the start of a new life. Read more, find out more. Pique curiosity. When we're on social media, especially, we need to always be thinking about how can we grab that attention, stop the scroll, and get people curious. Because a lot of times, even if people follow you, they probably don't really understand what you do. They might care about the cause, but our job is to get them even more invested and get them more deeply involved. There's so much that's not normal about raising a kid with a disability. Goodwill's LifeWorks is something with a focus and routine he can do every day. A quote, sometimes a story is a quote and a photo. So if you are on Twitter with the character counts being very limited, you can still do effective storytelling. It doesn't have to be a novel. And if you're looking for examples of stories that do not share identifying details, that protect confidentiality and protect identities, Amira, they're now called Amira Incorporated. They were called Amira New England. They do a fantastic job showcasing the fantastic work that they do. And they call these Milestone Mondays. And they just talk about what's going on in their program and what's going on in their shelter. A woman has completed her 30-day program and is now entering phase 1 of her full whole person care program. We're so proud. Join us in congratulating her. That really makes you feel like you know the organization. It makes you feel proud and inspired to be a part of this organization doing such fantastic things, but they never share the faces. They never share identifying details, anything like that. Usually, in fact, they share photos of staff and community members. Okay, another bucket of stories to pull from, insider stories. These could be staff members, these could be interns, these could be volunteers. Who works with and for your organization? Why do they do it? What do they get out of it? And then ask these kind of leading questions. What have they learned? What's been their best experience? What's been the hardest? And this is going to give your audience that much craved human touch, that behind the scenes insight. It's also really going to humanize your brand, which is absolutely key in the digital age when we are so in search of humans and not bots and not marketing automations, right? This is Macmillan Cancer Support. They did an entire storytelling campaign around Father's Day. It was a fundraiser, and they had a lot of their staff and volunteers share their stories to kind of break the ice and to get other people warmed up and to get other people sharing their stories. But really sharing doing a campaign, if you're doing a storytelling campaign, your interns, your volunteers, your staff might have to step up and go first to show people, first of all, how it's done, but also to get vulnerable and to just be an example for the rest of the organization. Of course, if you have staff stories like this, you want to share them. Leon Winston arrived at Swords to Plowshares as a client fresh out of rehab in need of housing. Now he is our COO and housing director. Read more about his story in this alumni feature. So showcasing the amazing things that are being done by your staff. A tip that I give to nonprofits, especially if they are hesitant and maybe skeptical of video, this is a generalization, but I've seen it work across organizations. Try to get an intern to do it first. So if you have college students working for you, high school students, Gen Z in any way, they have grown up on camera. They've grown up being filmed by their parents. They've grown up with videos online. They've grown up with Instagram and TikTok. In my experience, a lot of younger people are just very comfortable on video. They're just more comfortable than older people maybe. So try to find a younger person to speak to talk to maybe help you get a little bit more comfortable on video. And then they're going to show you what's popular and what really works. So what TWLOHA, To Write Love on Her Arms, that's what this organization is. They do a Q&A blog series with interns past and present. And what I love about their series is that they ask a specific question. What's the most difficult aspect of the internship? Or what have you learned? What's your favorite memory? What scared you the most about working here? Those kinds of things. Okay, let's see. Now we've got donor stories. Now, what I didn't mention before is that each of these stories can be used in various stages of the donor funnel. So when you're fundraising, you more likely than not want to use the impact story and talk about the impact that you're making and share your accomplishments and your insights in that way. When you're thanking donors or when you are just looking for some content for social media, donor stories are really great. I don't think they're the most effective when fundraising. They certainly won't hurt you if it's during a fundraising campaign, but usually impact stories are the best for direct appeals. But donor stories are a powerful form of social capital, and you want to make sure you're asking them, why did they give? Why do they continue to give? What does this cause mean to them? And I think you should be getting stories from every single one of your corporate sponsors. All those logos that you put up in a post or on an email, all those logos you put on social media, get a story instead. Get a story from the local Honda dealership that gave you $500. Ask them for a quote. It's so much more powerful. No one wants to see logos on social media. They don't, especially not Instagram. That logo, what's it called? It's like the logo soup. No, no one wants to see that. You can put it on a shirt. You can put it on a brochure or flyer, whatever. But I want to see a story of the corporate sponsors. I want to see a story of the donors. We're part of this desert and this community, and it is a part of us. So you can do this via interview, and then you can kind of ghostwrite it if you have some generous donors who are good writers and you think they might want to write for you. That's great too. Interviews are just fine. I support Bag and Baggage because after about 3 years away from the art form, they reminded me of everything I cherish about theater. So just exactly what does it mean to me? How does it enrich my life? How does this organization make my life more meaningful? I hope my donation will help other people struggling with finding their way in this world. These are great little graphics you can create. I've got some tools for you later on. In just a few minutes, we're going to look at some tools that you can use to create a lot of the visuals that are going to enhance your storytelling on social media. But quotes like this, they work magic. And I want you to look to your community for stories. So when I worked at a domestic violence shelter and I was living in Virginia, we obviously had a huge challenge getting client stories. We literally could not tell our client stories unless they were told through the perspective of a staff member or unless they were completely kept confidential. So I actually looked to our community partners. I talked to people in schools. I talked to the police. I talked to the firefighters. I talked to social workers. I talked to people whose lives we made easier or who could sleep better at night knowing that the shelter was here, that the program was there. And we talked about our connection and how we work together. So think about, maybe influential, well-respected community members, maybe the mayor, maybe city councilors, community partners, media personalities. This is another form of social proof, but also it could be a powerful way to make a connection, make a partnership. Think about your board members. Now, the night ministry, they do extensive storytelling on Facebook and on Instagram. They always do like member spotlights, they do staff spotlights, but they always do board spotlights. But the way they write them, they take the time, they write them like a mini article. They write them like a little mini blog post. And if you think about this particular post, you could repurpose this into an email. You could put it on your blog. There's millions of ways that you could repurpose this and recycle it and reuse it and chop it up. You could do a video. I mean, there's just lots and lots and lots of ways that you could make the most of a longer caption like that. Volunteer spotlights, community spotlights. You could just create this great little frame in Canva and just start using it and use it every week, use it every month. I love this story. So this is the Pine Street Inn where I live, and they showcased my Bob's Furniture. So Bob's Furniture and Jordan's Furniture are two very big competitors where I live. So when someone from Jordan's Furniture saw this story, they said, well, we can't have Bob's Furniture be the only one donating furniture to the Pine Street Inn. We've got to get in on this. So it actually created not really a rivalry, but it did create this kind of story where they were talking about, they were kind of joking about who's more generous. And then Pine Street Inn wins in the end because they got a lot of donations and a lot of awareness. It was on social media. So these kind of community partner stories, your in-kind partners, you never know who you're going to reach or who you're going to touch with those. A word of caution when collecting stories. If you just say to someone, so tell us your story. I was on a podcast the other day and they said, tell us your origin story. And I just didn't, I guess that's a superhero thing, right? I didn't really understand what they wanted me to say. I thought, oh my gosh, I have been doing this for a long time. I don't know what story you want to hear from me. So it's much better to ask leading questions. What's your favorite memory? How has our organization made you feel? How did you feel when you first discovered us? If it's a donor or a community member, what's one reason that you continue to support us? What impact have you witnessed in the community because of our work? I mean, it all is going to depend on who you're talking to and the context of it. But just telling someone, tell us your story, that's usually very intimidating. We don't think we have stories, which is surprising. Where else to find stories? Look at all the print materials that you have. Annual reports, grant appeals, event programs, brochures. Look everywhere and you will have the seeds and the kernels of some stories. So how do you craft your stories in a compelling way? You have to have these building blocks, and you can do it all on social media. I'm going to show you actually really quickly how to do that, but there has to be a hook. It has to get me interested, a character. There has to be stakes involved, some kind of detail, and then for our purposes, a call to action. So what does that look like? This is an email. This is Plumber Home, now called Plumber Youth Promise. They actually turned this into a social media post. If I died, who would come to my funeral? No child should ever have to wonder about the answer to that question. It already has all of the things, even in just those 2 sentences. Hook, stakes, character, conflict. That time I almost died in Honduras. This is Amira. We have to go now. Unfortunately, they've taken this blog down, so I can't link to it. But if you just Google Amira, or if you email me, I'm happy to send you to their blog. But that was an older one. Meet Elena. Hook, character, conflict, stakes. There have to be all of those elements to make us pay attention and to make us listen. Heather's story. This is a story of a family who couldn't, when school's out, they can't give their children lunch. And so it was saving summer for kids in Arkansas. Imagine if you were homeless. Put yourself in my shoes. And what I found very powerful about this particular one is the details. The more the chill cut to the bone, those kinds of details, if you can provide those, then it makes it more of a story. This is Helen Choi. This is Gravity, Charity Water. They tell a story of not just how she got water in her village and it was great and everyone was healthy. They told a story of how she went to them and she said, I finally feel beautiful. And I always try not to tear up when I tell the story because I love that. It's so much more than water, right? So everything we do is so much more than what it is on the surface. So what is that real truth that you are transforming people into? I mean, it's about beauty. It's not just about health. It's really powerful. So I'm happy to share that if it's just a fantastic story that Charity Water shared. So these are my kids. It's actually really not a more recent photo. They're probably a year older now. And the reason I share this is just to emphasize that stakes are so important. So the Berenstain Bears are our favorite books. We read them all the time. We've read them forever. But the recent Berenstain Bear books, they stopped having conflict in them. And I'm not sure why. But now it's really just the Berenstain Bears went to the aquarium and had fun. And the kids are not interested in those. They want to know, trouble at school, right? Brother's getting in trouble because he failed his test. Or a messy room. Mama's going to throw everything away in the room because it's so messy and they have to clean it up. So there have to be these stakes involved. Otherwise, it's just an essay. I just want to really reiterate that. And when you're thinking through how to frame the story, ask these questions. What do you want people to do? What do they need to believe and feel in order to do it? How can storytelling make them believe and feel that way, right? So you want to inspire people with your call to action rather than just say, sign up for our email list or donate. Help children like Kate. We can do this. Let's work to stop this. Let's solve this together. Because the story grabs the attention and then it's up to you to get people to take an action. So your stories are the gold, then you mold it, you go back and you kind of hammer it into place depending on where you want to share it. So your website, perfect place to share stories. We need to do so much more in this area. We need to stop looking at our websites as brochures and we need to start looking at them as real places to connect with our audience, visitors that are joining us that might not know anything about what we do. How can we grab them, get them this emotional connection? This is the Pine Street Inn. As you can tell, I'm a huge fan, colorful, visual, positive, happy. Email, another great way to share these kinds of stories. St. Jude sends a weekly featured patient story. I always know what to expect. It's always a great visual. Click more for the blog. Here's a little snippet. Come join us on our website. My name is Sharon. I'm one of the counselors at WAVAW. I work directly with the women who've had all aspects of their lives disrupted by the horrific act of rape and sexual assault. So this is not from the viewpoint of a client. This is from the viewpoint of a staff member, which I think is very powerful. Social media, of course, short, sweet, poignant, eye-catching. We've gone through so many examples, so many ways that you can do this. But I want to encourage you, if you're spending all this time putting stories in other places, you can repurpose them for social media. In terms of fundraising, what really works is a compelling story that grabs me emotionally and then a succinct call to action. Don't be afraid to ask me to do something. If you're doing a fundraising campaign, you can just share stories for the sake of awareness. You can share stories to build community. There's many reasons why you would share a story. These are actual stories. Instagram stories is a fantastic feature on Instagram where you can go behind the scenes, off the cuff, a little bit more B-roll-ish, and really lift the veil on the work that you're doing. So when you're creating these stories, especially for social media, there has to be some relevance. There has to be some urgency, some timeliness. There just has to be a reason that I'm going to pay attention. So you need to be asking questions constantly. What's the problem? What's the urgency? What are people talking about? What are they asking about? What are some myths and stereotypes that I can address here, right? Another tip is to tell the story in parts. Tell the story in parts. If you have a fantastic story to share, tell it in a 3-part series on your email. Tell it in a 4-part series on YouTube. We don't have to get every single element into one story. In fact, it's better to maybe kind of parse it out into little more bite-sized pieces. And then before we get to questions, I just wanted to share some tools with you. These are also in I believe they're in the chat, or they will be put in the chat in the resources section. Of course, many of you are very familiar with Canva. I'm sure it's life-changing. It's how I create all the graphics. Pretty much anything you see visually from me is created with Canva. WordSwag is another mobile app I like, kind of on the go. I'm not a big fan of the Canva mobile app. Don't tell them. I adore them, but their app I don't like it. I like the desktop. WordSwag is my go-to for mobile. Adobe Spark is another fantastic free resource for nonprofits for graphic design. Animoto for video and Typedo for video. It's really video editing and video creation for people that do not understand anything about video. You can create a montage from a lot of photos. You can create a montage from video clips. It's like video for dummies. I love Animoto. It's my favorite. So take a look at those. There's just no excuse not to have a visual with everything you do online, especially on social media. So I want to leave you with this thought. Digital storytelling. You're never going to tell your entire story in one post. Digital storytelling that connects the dots for your supporters. Think of your organization as a big connect the dot thing, right? Coloring book. The stories that you tell are the dots. It's like breadcrumbs leading people along the trail. And also just remember, people, they'll forget what you said. They'll forget the data. They'll forget what you did. They'll forget that you were in the community for 60 years and that you have 10,000 programs and services, but they will never forget how you made them feel. That's the powerful implication of storytelling. All right. Awesome. I'm so excited. I know there were probably a lot of questions. That's my website where you can go get all my contact information. You can get your copy of the digital storytelling workbook and, connect with me over there. So happy to take questions. We're right on time.
All right, Julia, that was amazing. I definitely learned a lot from it. Again, coming from a nonprofit background as well. Thank you so much for this presentation. We're about to hop into our Q&A, so go ahead and type your questions in there now.
Okay.
I hope that all of you are feeling equipped and inspired to utilize these storytelling tools and start storytelling for your organization on social media. It is no easy feat, but Julia, I think you broke it up into really digestible information. So thank you. So before we hop into our Q&A, I actually have a question for all of you. Now, type in the chat, how many of you would like to join a platform where you can get questions to get answers to any question that you have related to running your nonprofit anytime? How does that sound to you guys? a place where you can go and log in and get all the answers that you need for your questions. Sure. Yes, I like the enthusiasm. Awesome. And if you're not typing in, you want to hear more, well, I've got it for you. We are excited to announce the launch of our Donorbox Knowledge Community, where you will get focused answers to your burning questions regarding marketing and web development and fundraising, board management, and so much more. The Donorbox Knowledge Community will give you the opportunity to connect with like-minded individuals, build meaningful professional relationships, and share your experiences in a welcoming and positive space. So we are offering exclusive early access just for our attendees today in this webinar. And the sign-up window will remain open for just 30 minutes after this webinar. So we will redirect you to the Donorbox Knowledge Community website right after this webinar ends. So once this ends, you will appear on that website there. So please go and explore. Now, I'm going to go ahead and open up the Q&A for all of you. So let's get started. Let me see what kind of questions we have got here. All right. Let me scroll up at the top. Okay, a question from Mark. Social media is often so superficial. How to really touch the heart and stand out?
I mean, I think that the reason people are on social media is to connect with other people. So as long as you can share your why, your vision for the transformation that you are trying to achieve, that's really going to resonate with people. And that's honestly why I work exclusively with nonprofits. I was working with small businesses. I love small businesses. I am a small business. I love brands. But I just couldn't get that emotion. I agree. I think that so much of what's on social media is superficial. And you know what's superficial? It reminds me of suspicious and superficial. And actually, I think that the two things are very true. So that's why I work with nonprofits. I really believe that we have that potential to tell these stories that are authentic and true. This is what we see every single day. And these are the problems we're working on. So if you focus on the problem you're solving and the solution you're providing and stay laser focused on your donor, your audience, what do they want to see? What do they want to learn more about? Then you can kind of cut through all of that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that great answer. Now, another one from Alexandra. I work in the humanities. What kind of information should we get from donors, sponsors, or members that are compelling and emotional? Their focus is on being lifelong learners.
Oh, wow. I mean, what does being a lifelong learner mean? To me, that's the very first question. What does it mean to you? And what are things that have changed your life? And what would you say to someone else who is hesitant and doesn't think that they can be a lifelong learner? Asking questions like, what does this mean to you? How has this affected your life? And what advice would you give someone else? Those are great questions to ask donors and corporate sponsors.
Absolutely. Awesome. All right. And now let's see here. A question from Francesca. What is the best way to get members to attend workshops and events that they are holding through storytelling?
You might not like this answer. Create events and workshops that they want to go to. So I have a client and we're struggling with this right now because they create these events that they don't have any input from the community. And then it's like pulling teeth to get them to go. I do that. I've done that. So I don't do that anymore. I used to do that a lot where I would say, oh, I want to teach about this. And then I would do a webinar and no one would come or be poorly attended. Now I really listen to my community and I listen to the questions they're asking and the kind of information they want. I actually go do surveys. I do focus groups. I talk to people. I say, what is it you want to learn? What are you hoping to gain? What can I teach you? And that's really the way. That's the way. So it's really hard to convince someone to go to an event that they don't want to go to, or to like pull teeth to get people to attend events that are not relevant to them. But if you start getting more community input and you start creating events that they have input and buy-in and they're empowered, they've been giving you feedback on, it's much easier to get them to spread the word about it.
Absolutely. Thank you. And another great question from Hallie. When telling an impact story, I'm trying to identify a way to be sure that the person whose story we're telling isn't just saying yes to sharing their story out of a feeling of obligation.
Yep.
Do you have any suggestions for this?
Yes. So work closely with the program officers and have a storyteller's bill of rights. So if you just Google storyteller's bill of rights, I don't know if I have any examples on my website. I might, but create a bill of rights for every single person that says, this is explicitly like, we want you to know XYZ. Hold on a second. Sorry, I have allergies.
It's the hazards of talking for a very long time.
I think that's important. And the first thing to know is that you're thinking about this. So you're already on the right track. Just make sure there's always like an off switch. The person can pull their story at any time. They can pull it in 10 years. They can decide, even if you spent $20,000 on a video, that they don't want to be in it. I mean, they're in the driver's seat, but create that bill of rights for them and then work really closely with the program officers or the person that's talking directly to them. And you might be that person, but work closely with a trusted person at your organization. That is such a problem, especially when working with youth. So I think even doing a training for staff and open discussion with clients about how this is not reciprocal. If you do not want to share your story, you are not going to get preferential treatment. Just being very clear about it. This is a good question.
Thank you. That was a great question and a great answer. Thank you for that. Now, I love this question from Marian. What are your big no-nos of storytelling?
The big no-no that I just harp on all the time is don't be boring. Don't say, Julia was homeless. She came to Rosie's place. She got some training and she left. That's the story that I think a lot of us are telling. The big no-nos are don't be like everybody else. Don't do what don't do things you're uncomfortable doing. Don't do things that you feel are exploitative or that you would not feel comfortable putting out into the world. But really, just don't be boring. Don't be boring. And don't be like too cute or cheeky either. I don't know. Sometimes that rubs me the wrong way. I guess it depends.
That's a great answer. And you shared a lot of great resources for creating a compelling story. And I think some of that will help with that too. And a resource that I like using is actually Copy AI. And that kind of helps you find your voice. If you need inspiration, you can type out what you want to say and you can change your tone to friendly, to witty, to professional. So Copy AI might be another great way to not be boring. I certainly need inspiration sometimes. So that's helped me a lot. And there are some websites like that around. All right, lots of great questions coming in here. Here's a good one from Bob. Bob's perspective is that campaigns that engage multi-channels drives a greater overall response. Question is the storytelling approach different for digital versus conventional print or direct mail?
Yes, so when you're crafting your story, you're molding it, right? So the Andy Goodman quote, it's on one of the slides here, Andy Goodman from the Goodman Center. He says, the stories are the gold, and you mold them whether you want a necklace or a watch or a ring. So what I often do with clients, actually, I'm doing this with one client, we write a direct mail appeal letter. So we get all the story, we frame it, we almost have too much information, and we write like a 3-page direct mail appeal. Then from that, we take out pieces of it and we mold it into whether it's on Instagram or whether it's on an email or whether it's on Twitter or on Facebook. And we kind of, because you have to have different tones, you have to have different character counts. So you can reuse the same story, core story, in multiple different places. And I absolutely think that if you're doing a fundraising campaign, you should be using the same kind of story, maybe different quotes, maybe different photos on all of the channels at your disposal.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that.
Sure.
Now let's see here. We are making our way towards the end. Now, let me find some. All right, here's a great one from Alejandra. Most of the time we work with low-income people who do not have access to social media. How do you recommend reaching out to these people and making them known and integrating with the story behind a nonprofit?
So, I mean, I would reach them where they are. We had this problem. I worked with a pre-collegiate program at UMass Boston, and they were targeting teens and college students. This was a while ago, before everybody had cell phones, and they didn't have cell phones. They didn't have email, and some of them didn't have internet access at their homes. So we had to get really creative. I mean, you have to reach people where they are, whether that is a flyer or a mailing or a physical phone call to a landline. And if people are not on social media, then you need to figure out where they are and how you can best reach them. I know when I do work for Boston Public Schools, we take out newspaper ads sometimes, because sometimes the population we're trying to reach, they read the physical newspaper, right? So really think through where they might be, where they're spending their time, and go there.
Awesome. Great tips. Thank you for that. All right. I think we have time for one more. And this question is from Ashley. And let's see here. How do you balance telling authentic, quality stories while maintaining a healthy relationship with algorithms to stay relevant? If we don't post consistently, then our traffic really dives.
So the algorithms, when we say algorithm, this is the artificial intelligence that decides who sees what post when and how and in what order. So nothing's chronological. Not all of your fans and followers see your posts. That's just like the baseline that we have to know about the algorithm on all social media sites. Emails do not have that. Like your inbox doesn't have, it has a weird algorithm with spam and junk mail, but everything's in chronological order. Facebook is not like that, and Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn and everything else. So algorithms reward consistency, but what consistency means is just showing up on a regular basis. What happens is that we have an event, right? And we're posting every day for a month before the event, and then we don't post for 6 months. So the algorithm, Facebook, sees that and says, oh, these people must just be like a flash in the pan. They're probably not relevant. And then all that momentum you built up goes away. So even if it's once a week, a couple of times a week, just showing up regularly for your fans on whatever platform you choose, maybe it's one, maybe it's two, that it's really like exercise, right? You can't just exercise every day for a week and then not exercise for 3 months. You're going to have to build that up again. So if you think of it like exercise, I think it's just will give you a better frame of reference.
Thank you so much. And I think that was a great way. That was a great example there. Yes. All right.
Great
everyone.
Questions.
Yes, those were such great questions. And now before you sign off, I just want to announce that Donorbox's next webinar, Data to Action, Making Your Nonprofit's Data Visible and Useful, will be on Wednesday, June 9th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I'm going to drop that link in the chat box. And again, we are so proud to provide the tools and resources you need to help you help others. Thank you all for attending this webinar. And Julia, thank you for
Thanks,
all
Jenna.
these wonderful resources. So everybody give her a round of applause, and thank you all.
Thank you so much.